Geoverse Part 2 To Love is Human by GeodesicDragon. Chapter 1 Hope is Rekindled. I sat with my back against the wall, knees up to my chest, as I stared at the pendant in my hand. "Dude, you're scaring me," John said as he sat down next to me. "You've been looking at that thing for hours now. What's so special about it?" I looked him in the eyes, my own eyes puffy and red from the copious amounts of crying I had been doing. "Remember that story I told you?" I said quietly. "The one about the ponies?" John nodded slightly, turning away from my gaze. "And remember how I said I fell in love with one of them?" "Yeah, I do," John replied. "She gave me a pendant exactly like this one," I said blankly. John turned around, a shocked expression on his face. "What?" He shook his head. But how?" "I don't know how I could possibly have this pendant," I said. "You're the only person I've told, and even then I missed out the exact details of the pendant. This can't be a prank." I stood up, clutching the pendant in my fist. What I saw in Equestria was no dream. I was really there, I said, my voice raw with emotion. I put the pendant around my neck. "So, what are you going to do now?" John asked, standing up and laying a reassuring hand on my shoulder. I turned around, my face full of determination. "I'm going back," I said forcefully. "I have to see Twilight again." John gasped. "Dude, you can't be serious." "I have never been more serious of anything in my entire life," I shouted, causing John to flinch. "One way or another, I'm going to see Twilight sparkle again." John sighed. "I can see you're serious about this," he said, "so I'll help you." I smiled, and John chuckled. "Who knows?" he said with a grin. "Maybe I'll come with you this time and find me a pony to settle down with." "You sly bastard," I said as I punched him on the arm. We exchanged a few glancing blows as the smile on my face grew wider. John put his arms up. "Ah," he said. "Do you have any idea how to get back?" My face fell. "Shit, no I don't," I groaned. I threw myself on the couch and buried my head in my hands. Through the gap in my fingers I could see John standing in front of me with his arms folded. "That doesn't mean you can give up," he said sternly, holding out his hand. I took it and he pulled me off the couch into a hug. "I'm with you, mate," he said. "Let's get you home." "But I don't know where to begin," I said softly. "Then let's start with where it all began," John replied. I pulled away from him and smiled. "The crossing where I was shot." It was another day in Ponyville, and the town square was busy with ponies buying and selling their wares at the market stalls. All the shops were busy, and the general atmosphere was a happy one. But one building stood out from the rest. The Ponyville Library stood eerily quiet. Many of the townsfolk were worried, but they were too afraid to approach the library for fear of what they might find within. One group, however, was not afraid. They walked straight up to the door and knocked. Sobbing could be heard from the other side, indicating signs of life. "Twilight," Applejack said, her voice full of concern. "Come on, Sugar Cube, open up and let us in." There was no reply. "Let me try," said Rarity as she nudged Applejack aside. "Twilight, darling, it's your friends. Won't you let us in?" Her plea fell on deaf ears. "Twilight? It's Fluttershy," the timid Pegasus said. "We are very worried about you. We just want to come in and see if you're okay, if that's all right with you." "You're not going to leave until I let you in, aren't you?" The voice was Twilight's, but it was full of remorse. "You're our friend, Twilight," Rainbow Dash said proudly. "We're not gonna leave you like this." "Yeah!" exclaimed Pinkie Pie. "We love you, Twilight. We hate seeing you like this." There was a series of clicking noises as the door was unlocked. It opened wide enough to let all 5 mares in, then slammed shut with a resounding echo. Twilight," Applejack asked nervously. "It's a bit dark in here. Can you turn the light on?" Another click and the room lit up. The mares gasped when they saw the figure in the middle of the room. Twilight was lying on the sofa, her eyes red and puffy. She was wrapped up in several t-shirts and appeared to have lost a lot of weight. Her mane was unkempt and messy, and the normally tidy library was a mess of books and empty food containers. "Oh, Twilight," Rarity said as she cautiously approached the broken unicorn. Wrapping a hoof around her, Rarity pulled her friend in for a hug. Twilight began crying again, much louder than before, and as the tears poured down her face, her friends joined Rarity, wrapping the purple unicorn in a group hug. No pony has helped me in so long," Twilight said between sobs. I miss him so much." "I know you do, darling," said Applejack, "but you gotta move on. You wouldn't want to live your life grieving for him." I can't move on," Twilight screamed. "I just can't." "We'll help you get through this, Twilight," said Pinkie Pie solemnly. "We'll do whatever it takes." Twilight pulled away from the hug, a small smile on her face. "I know you will, girls," she sniffled. "I know." The six of them sat in silence for a while before Rarity noticed something and spoke. "Twilight, darling," she asked gently, "where's Spike?" "I sent him back to Canterlot," Twilight replied. "Because you didn't want him to see you like this?" asked Rainbow. "No, for research," Twilight said. "Research?" Applejack raised an eyebrow. "Research on what?" "Remember when I went back in time to try and warn myself about the disaster that wasn't really a disaster?" Twilight said, blushing at the memory. The others nodded. "While I was in the Starswirl the Bearded Wing, I found a scroll on how to talk to spirits." Twilight's smile grew. "Spirits?" Rainbow Dash checked. "As in, talking to the dead?" "Exactly," Twilight replied. "If Spike can find it again, I can use it to talk to Geo in the afterlife, and get some closure." She sighed. "But the spell requires 6 of us." She looked pleadingly at the others, who exchanged cautious glances between them. "If that's what it'll take for you to be happy again," Pinkie Pie said, "then I'll stand by you." "Me too," said Rarity. "And me," Applejack smiled. "You can count on me, Twilight," Rainbow Dash said, punching the air with a hoof. Fluttershy simply nodded. "Thank you, girls," Twilight squealed, grabbing her friends in a group hug. "One way or another, I'm going to see Geo again." In the chaos of the library, the purple unicorn found herself filled with a renewed sense of purpose.